Hey, welcome. My name's Jen. I'm a current student at Oxford studying classics, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Gaby. I'm also a student studying at Oxford doing classics, and we're here with...
I'm Andrew Sillett. I'm a lecturer in Latin literature here, and the last time I played a computer game was Tomb Raider 2.
Hi, I'm Marchella. I teach various aspects of classical reception and tragedy here in the faculty. Last time I played a computer game was Spyro Year of the Dragon.
Oh, vintage! Wonderful. So what are we doing, Jen?
Well, I'm trying not to die, but we are here fighting the Cyclops. It's one of the mythic battles in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And the Cyclops is one of the figures that is repeated quite a lot across classical texts. So I don't know if Gaby, if you want to give like an overview of like.
Yeah, cool. So the Cyclops most famously appears in Homer's Odyssey. I guess that's like one of the oldest texts we have. They also appear in like Hesiod's Theogony, about like the creation of the gods and the different creatures. Oh guy, this guy is angry.
He is an angry boy.
But yeah, what we were thinking is about how kind of like lots of different ancient texts seem to use the myth of the Cyclops and keep going back to it. And especially in this episode, it's quite comic. It's like though the guy is like quite scary, it's quite ugly. It's still quite a comic scene. Like we just saw Empedocles get smushed. So we were thinking about like how the classical text, which the game seems to be kind of like drawing on, invites us to sympathise with the character. So like Chella, do you want to like maybe talk a bit about like disability in the Cyclops?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting just watching this, that as you say, the Cyclops is somebody who appears in a whole variety of different texts across genre as well.
Yeah.
We meet him in a satire play by Euripides, we meet him in an epic, we meet him in some poetry, we meet him in the Latin poet Ovid's long narrative poem, The Metamorphoses.
Yeah.
But this, to me, is not just any old Cyclops, right? This is, I mean, the Cyclops they're a race rather than a specific monster in Greek mythology. So this is but the fact that you're fighting him means that we're not in certain kinds of Cyclops narratives, right? We're not in Theocritus, where we meet him as a lover, right? We're not in, I can't think of another example.
In Ovid Met, he's a lover as well.
Yeah, exactly.
He still smushes the guy.
Yeah, I think you're right. Those things are not separate, but it seems to me that the creators have got this right in the sense that this is the Odyssean way for him to appear. But I'm really struck by the fact that they've really gone in for the monstrous Cyclops thing. Yeah. They've really, I mean, this guy is terrifying. He's throwing his fists around. He sort of looks like the Hulk, but with one eye. He's not green, just in case people were wondering. But which to me seems almost the opposite of what happens to him in Homer, right? Okay. In Homer, he's a monster, he's a big scary monster in the sense that he threatens to eat people and indeed does eat people a lot. But Homer is really invested in the other side of the Cyclops, which is to ask that question of who do we call a monster and why do we do that? There's, I think, my favourite moment in the whole of the Odyssey is the moment where the Cyclops, it's after he's lost his eye has been put out by Odysseus and his men, and after that his favourite ram, because who doesn't have a favourite ram, is leaving the cave, and as he leaves the cave the ram stops and it looks at him, and it like there's this really sad moment where he cries over this ram and he says, you know, Ram, you were my only friend, and now because I'm upset, here you are waiting for me. And it's like a moment where we just see this incredible humanity.
Yeah.
Much more, I mean, he's much more humane than the great big epic hero that we've been following throughout this entire story, who has just orchestrated this poor creature's eye to be put out. Oh, there's a massive eye on the wall there. Wow. And will soon, you know, leave on his ship boasting that that he was the sort of great person who killed the Cyclops.
Yeah.
So I think it's about, I mean, for me in that scene, Homer is invested in using the Cyclops as a figure of not somebody who's necessarily entirely monstrous, but somebody who, because of the invasion of his territory, has been made out to be a monster.
Yeah. In, I guess, a more kind of like negative light, do you think that the fact that the Cyclops is kind of portrayed as like a comic figure, we kind of like meant to laugh at him a little bit, do you think that that's in any way connected to the fact that he does have one eye and he's kind of like represented with the disability?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's true. There's something very, very difficult about this story from a disability point of view, right? Because it sets up a character who has one eye rather than two. So is kind of doesn't have a normative body, doesn't have a body that we think of as like a human body, and then the very weakness of that bodily difference, i.e. that he has one eye, not two, is exploited by Odysseus in order to further disable him.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to lots of very modern ways that we think about disability, in that the fact that he only has one eye doesn't actually disable him at all.
Yeah.
He doesn't need two eyes. He never does. He lives, we're told in Homer and in Euripides that he lives perfectly happily. That's the thing about the Cyclopes, is that they're super happy whenever we meet them. And they have a world that is adapted to their specific bodies. And what Odysseus does is he takes that adaptation away from him.
Okay.
He disables him by making him unable to function in the world in which he's functioned. And I think this is, it's a trope. There is a trope of very harmful, very ableist trope of disabled villains, and you see it in things like Disney films. You see it in lots and lots of types. It's not just the Greeks. You see it in lots and lots of types of storytelling, where the fact that somebody's body is somehow different to what we think of as a kind of normative human body makes them somehow suspect and makes them somehow suspicious. We're supposed to kind of read into that disability the fact that they are immoral, or and that is a hugely harmful trope, and it's a trope that very much operated for a long time, and I would say still operates in an ableist way in real people's lives. The idea, for instance, that used to be very common, is still, and probably in some circles very common. Among friends of your age and of our age, probably you don't hear it as much, but among people's grandparents, you certainly hear the idea that disabled people might be faking it, or there might be something to gain from that disability, and that's something that those kinds of tropes that want to read disabled bodies as something morally problematic because they're not normative. Those are hugely prevalent, and they begin very much in these ancient texts.
Okay.
I think one of my favourite things about the Cyclops, even after he's been blinded, lost his own, even once he's lost his only eye, is so you can sort of see Odysseus' hubris, that he thinks that as soon as that eye's been taken away, he's going to be fine. As soon as the Cyclops has lost his eye, he'll be able to walk out. And the Cyclops immediately realises that this is what's going to happen. It just moves this giant rock in the way of the cave. He's like, well, great, well, he's blind, but you can't, because it's still a big rock there. And has that clever thing of when he opens the cave to try and graze his sheep, right? He leads the sheep out, and the men just try to follow afterwards. And Polyphemus is just actually stroking each one's back. It's like fleecy, weird, hairy Greek man. Right, back inside. And I think it's going to be easy, just that the disability is going to be what's going to help Odysseus to overcome Polyphemus. But Polyphemus, who is the Cyclops in question, but he adapts to that remarkably quickly. And it's nice to have him sort of not just as a brute, which is sort of how this Brontes, apparently, how Brontes the Cyclops is playing. He's a clever guy, and I think as well as being sympathetic, there's something quite admirable about his approach to coping with all the awful things that awful Odysseus does to him.
Well, admirable, I guess, in a way, but also that this is also a trope of disability in literature, right? This idea that people who are disabled have some kind of other superhuman ability.
Okay.
And again, this is a cultural thing. People used to think, and in fact Aristotle thinks and says very clearly that people who are blind remember things better, or they hear things better, or there's this
Tiresias, doesn't he get
absolutely
blinded? But then he gets the gift of foresight.
Yeah.
And as a sort of
Wait, what text is that?
It's in the Met.
Well,
it's
also
is it probably in other texts as well?
Well, he's really frequent in tragedy, Tiresias. But he appears in all these different tragedies. But that text where he is explicitly given prophecy in exchange for his. So in exchange for his mortal sight, he's given sight of the future. He's given second sight, I guess we would call it. Yeah. That's in a hymn on the Bath of Pallas by Callimachus, and it's Athena who, in that poem, who does it. In other texts, it's a different goddess usually. But in that poem, Athena says, "I can't give him." It's it's a really nice poem actually, because so Athena is talking to Tiresias' mum.
Okay.
They just happen to be hanging around doing their washing. And Tiresias' mum, they are. And Tiresias' mum is complaining because she's upset that her son has been blinded by this goddess.
Yeah.
And so Athena is like, oh yeah, but don't worry. At first she says, it could have been much worse, beware. And she lists all these other myths where worse things happen to people. And then she says, well look, if you're really upset about this, look, here's what we'll do. I'll give him in exchange this prophecy, so it won't matter that he's blind. So there is this trope of getting something superhuman in exchange for having a human sense taken away. And I think, obviously that lends itself to the kind of idea that there's something admirable, there's something remarkable about people. And you see that a lot, say, around the Paralympics. You see people talk about how inspirational people are for running a race. And that, I think we maybe need to also think about the very harmful side of that.
Yeah.
Which is, superhumanizing somebody is not humanizing them.
Yeah.
Putting somebody in a category marked superhuman is still not necessarily treating them as a human being.
Right,
so we need to be kind of wary of that, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess on that note of humanizing, sorry, I'm just dodging. It's interesting that a lot of other monsters, I guess, in myth, or things that are characterized as monsters, aren't given names a lot of the time. However, Polyphemus in Homer, he's the Cyclops, he's given a name, and even in this game, the Cyclops here is given the name Brontes. So
we found out that comes from Hesiod.
Oh really?
I've got the quote here. There's Brontes. I think I deleted it from this one.
Nice.
Oh, whoops. Well, one of them is Brontes.
By
and
the magic
Hesiod's
of
editing,
the quote from Hesiod will now appear in the screen.
Right.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Movie magic. We'll also edit in the rainbow there. But yeah, that's really cool that that's also come from myth. But yeah, it's just tying in with what you're saying.
It's amazing that you're able to academic discussion.
I'm mostly just
asking.
being cool, nodding. But that's another aspect.
And on monsters and names, though, obviously, it matters in Homer that the monster has a name, because the trick at the end of this whole story is that Odysseus will trick the Cyclops. The Cyclops says to him, tell me what your name is, and it's because he's going to curse him. You need somebody's name in order to curse them, and his dad happens to be Poseidon, so it's kind of easy. So he wants to curse him. He wants to call out his name to the gods, and he can't because he doesn't know what he's called. So Odysseus, being the annoying little what's it that he is, decides that instead of just telling him his name, he's going to say that his name is Nobody, and he says. That's what he says, nobody. So then the Cyclops calls to all his friends, nobody is attacking me. And all the other Cyclops are like, well, what are you worried about then if no one's attacking you?
I think one of the things that's interesting about this chap, about Brontes the Thunder, and again, what I can remember of the Hesiod Brontes, is a thoroughly monstrous version of the Cyclops. While in the Homer, he is sort of primarily he's a shepherd, right? He's a big guy and he eats people. Not great in that way, but there is something sort of semi-civilized about him, and he's not entirely different from the men. He's just bigger and slightly more cannibalistic than they are. Whereas Hesiod, who's an author who's writing at almost exactly the same, who's composing at almost exactly the same time as Homer in his Theogony, which is a sort of a teaching poem to teach you about how the gods were created and how the universe was born. When he introduces the Cyclops, they're created as these sort of super villains in a way, and they're the enemies of the gods, the titans and the giants, the ones who are going to try and climb up to heaven and sort of tear Zeus and his sort of band of brothers and sisters and also wives, all the same, try and remove them from heaven. And for Hesiod, it's important to make them as scary and monstrous as possible. And I think it's interesting to note this is exactly the sort of thing that we've got depicted here. This isn't someone, to me, who looks like a shepherd. This is trying to go for the most horrifying, grotesque, villainous picture of the Cyclops you can possibly get. So it seems to me like there are two ways of thinking about Cyclopes in almost exactly the same period of Greek literature. On the one hand, these sort of semi-human creatures who sort of teach us something about our society by being different. They eat people, we don't eat people largely. They have shepherds, we like growing crops, etc. We drink wine. When they drink wine, they get incredibly hungover to the extent that they can be blinded by Odysseus. On the other hand, for Hesiod, it's a way of thinking about all of those sort of most elemental and terrifying and scary nightmare images of what sort of thing could actually battle a god, what sort of creature can actually do that. And I think that's what Brontes is. I think it's interesting they've chosen to call this guy Brontes rather than Polyphemus, which is Odysseus' one, and is surely the most famous Cyclops. If you want to have a Cyclops, you call him Polyphemus. Yeah. But, Gaby, were you not telling me that there is another cyclopic character in this game?
Oh yes. Oh, so
excellent lead-in.
Oh yes, excellent lead-in. Well, I guess this links in again to kind of like ideas of like, I guess, like monsters versus humanity. Who can we sympathise with? Because at the beginning of the game, like one of the first main quests, you have to defeat like a thug villain guy. Who's like a mercenary, and his nickname is, or like I guess his gang name is like the Cyclops, and he only has one eye, and I think part of the mission is you have to steal his like obsidian eye, and even then he's presented as like a kind of like bumbling sort of brutish character. Like he's still quite scary because he's like really buff and can kill you with his like super cool weapon. And I guess they've kind of like put that in because of the name of the game, Odyssey. They want to like put that reference in immediately, and then later on in the game we actually do face a real Cyclops. So it's interesting that we have that kind of like comparison, and it's like kind of testing, I guess, like what we see in the text. It's kind of like about questioning like humanity, our values, or like with Polyphemus in the cave, how he can be this monstrous person who doesn't abide by human laws in the sense that he will eat a few of Odysseus' friends, but at the same time Odysseus and his friends have broken other human laws. So the Greek law of xenia, which is the hospitality law, they go into the cave and they basically just like drink all of Polyphemus's wine, eat all of his cheese without asking, which obviously is just not okay. I mean, it definitely deserves like being eaten for. Like if someone came in my house. Yeah, just a couple. Just to like make an example.
Well, Odysseus is your standard colonizer, right? He turns up in a ship, he takes all of your stuff, he causes you not to live according to the customs that you are accustomed to, and then he leaves again, having won his own riches and got, on his way back to his own land. So I think what's interesting about kind of what I'm watching you, Jen, very expertly doing,
just like running around.
What's interesting about it though is that you are here in the role of Odysseus.
No, it's fine.
Sorry. There's a reason why these disabled characters have to be presented in the way that they're presented, because you are here in the role of Odysseus, as in it's your role to dehumanize this character, because you have to kill him. Or in the other part of the game you have to steal from him, is that right?
Oh, you have to kill him as well.
You have to kill him as well,
and then you end up killing him.
So
spoilers.
So the game has to in a way engage with the Odyssey in a very particular way, right? It has to put you into the role of Odysseus, because you need something from this guy. You need to kill him. You need to take control of this area.
You actually need to take his eye, because it's like an ancient. Yeah, his eye is one of the ancient Isu artifacts.
Okay.
So they're like the ancient civilization.
Wow, so it's even about stealing ancient artifacts.
Kind of. It's a whole thing.
Could they make this a parody of the Elgin marbles anymore?
This is amazing.
But what's interesting is that in the Odyssey, my favourite thing about that story in the Odyssey is that it does a shift. It lets you sit behind the eyes of Odysseus and look at these people, that shows my biases, look at these monsters as if they are strange and foreign, and they do strange things, and they're not quite humans, even though actually we find out later they behave quite a lot like humans. We're allowed to other them just as Odysseus others them. And then as soon as we realise what's about to happen, everything starts to change. We suddenly, he feels pain like a human does. He has a favourite pet sheep like a human might do. He does all these things that are essentially human. But the game can't let us do that shift, because the game needs us to be in the role of the attacker, to be in the role of Odysseus in the Odyssey. Right? So it has to treat the Odyssey in a particular way, I think.
Yeah. No, that's definitely it, because you literally just come into this guy's cave and just like begin a battle with him. Like there's absolutely no context. Like you just, if you think about it, you're just coming into this guy's home in the very same way that Odyssey is, or that Homer is.
Yeah, it's like an invasion of some sort.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe we could like route it back to, have you looted Empedocles?
Haven't what? I haven't.
This guy that we came in with.
Yeah, we haven't. So I could kill Bronte's now, yeah.
Yeah, finish him.
Finish him.
I don't know if it won't let you
What?
go back in if you kill him. I don't think. I think it like transports you out.
Oh, okay.
No,
so-
no, well, I think and there's Empedocles. I
Oh,
don't know if
poor
you can
guy,
do
yeah,
him.
there we
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Rip in peace.
Let me just. Wait, where is he?
He's literally just right there beneath
Cool.
his.
Oh, yeah.
There he is. I
There
don't
he
think
is.
I don't
Little
think
body.
Smooshed yet
God.
further.
Right. Okay.
he is a pulp at this point.
He's a bit.
So Empedocles was the guy from the cutscene at the beginning, right? And he's been your
Yeah.
guide to this. And Empedocles is a real character, but from Greek history rather than Greek myth. So he's a philosopher from the 5th century. And he lived on Sicily, which is the place where the Cyclops are supposed to live. So when the Greeks try to... Ooh, nice.
Just thought I'd take a photo of that. No.
When people read the Odyssey, one thing that they like doing is try and find their home. So when he's travelling around, whereabouts is this? And it's generally felt that Sicily is the place where the Cyclops live. So there's a nice, there's something nice going on by choosing Sicily's most famous philosopher to be your. To be your friend here. So Empedocles, in real life, I don't think ends up dying because he's squashed by a Cyclops. He dies because he falls into Etna, doesn't he? He climbs up the volcano and sort of throws himself into that to try and prove his divinity, or he does it accidentally because he's reading his philosophy. And people who like read books when they walk down the street, he's sort of doing that and sort of trips into a volcano.
But that's what he's doing in like this episode. He's
Yeah.
like trying to prove his divinity. He like sort of walks in and was like, "My brothers and sisters," and then
Poor
Rip.
Empedocles.
Yeah, because he thinks that the Cyclops is like one of the gods, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I'm just going to join my family. This is great. And then, swoosh.
But the question is, does he have any philosophy on his body? Can we check and see whether he's been reading any
I
philosophy?
tried to steal his body, or steal from his body.
You have to do it like right at the beginning of the fight.
Oh,
Hang on, he thinks the Cyclops is one of the gods.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is he
so
really?
he thinks like the cave is where like his brothers and sisters are, so like the other deities. So he thinks he's gonna basically like ascend into Olympus. I guess he does in a way.
In a way,
Oh, gosh, rip in
Rip
pieces.
in
But
pieces.
something I think about a lot is how we decide whether someone. So there are all these characters in ancient myths that are somehow outside of like humanity. They're kind of on the fringes of humanity, and like some of them we categorize as sort of subhuman, like monsters and things, or hybrids of humans and animals and that kind of thing. And some of them we categorize as superhuman, like gods.
Yeah.
And there are hybrids of gods in Greek myth too, of course. And I wonder if one of the things that's interesting about him making that assumption is, why do we make those decisions?
Yeah.
And are those two things, gods and monsters, as different as we think they are?
Yeah. I think especially it links quite nicely to sort of like Assassin's Creed lore, especially in the older games. They were like a lot more invested in like the idea of the Isu civilization. So the whole kind of game is based around these like ancient artifacts that have like sort of godly powers, and it's because they're remnants from a civilization called the Isu, who were basically like superhuman, super advanced. And some of the characters you see in the earlier games are Jupiter, Hera, or Juno, Minerva.
Yeah.
They all appear in this game. It's just that they're basically like a super advanced civilization that came before humans.
Okay.
And then these creatures, they're kind of like they're remnants of that civilization. So the eye that the Cyclops has, you basically get it, and it turns out to be an ancient Isu artifact. So it's kind of like this guy is like directly linked to the gods in the sense that he's like the remnants. It's just like in this game, he's like the remnants of this. Oh look, there we go, the first civilization artifact.
Yeah. So as
Oh,
That's not nice. Ooh.
Oh.
It's like in the other games, they have this thing called the Apple of Eden, which that kind of looks like.
Yeah, which it exactly looks like
Is-
it, right?
is
I
it?
think
Is it?
It's the same model.
What are you trying to say, Ubisoft?
What am I
What are
trying
you
to
doing?
say?
And they're literally talking about
Oh,
prophecy,
Oh
aren't
look,
they?
wait,
Yeah.
didn't he just transform into like a normal person?
Oh, can we?
We missed it!
No, that was perfect. What an
Oh, but look,
excellent
you get the
link.
Polyphemus bludgeon.
Oh wait. Oh. Okay.
Wait, can we go into the Oh wait, can you go back in?
It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't.
Go into your inventory. Let's take a look at the
Yeah.
the
Orb.
So.
nice orb.
Nice orb.
Wait. So it was a.
You've got a horse in your bag?
The horse is called Phobos. It's amazing.
Oh, nice.
Like one of the
Yeah.
So Phobos is one of Ares. Ares is the Greek version, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Ares' son, who drives one of his chariots. So there's Deimos and Phobos. who drive his chariots in war, and then your horse is literally,
Aw.
transporting you across the world, which is quite, I like that. I don't know, they're two of my favourite gods.
I think it was I think it was the heavy.
Oh, that big hammer there.
It was one of the heavy up.
Battles
Go up. Go up.
Yep.
There he is, heavy bladed.
Oh, Polyphemus. Oh, so it's so
that's
Brontes had Polyphemus's bludgeon.
Oh!
It's
wow.
connection.
Hesiod and Homer united at last. You could engrave it.
Yeah. Hold on, that was not good. Okay, let's.
You just hit
I just
a
hit a
burning
wall.
pyre.
Oh my god. Well, that pyre,
Dangerous.
if it was programmed to be fragile in the game, I would have destroyed it, but alas. So yeah, I think.
One more thing.
Yeah.
When Andrew and I were looking at the cutscene before playing it, when you loot Empedocles, you pick up a slice of goat's cheese. So we were like, how is Empedocles connected to goat's cheese? And then
we found out, the first thing we thought was, where on earth in that tiny loincloth was he keeping his goat's cheese? And what are you supposed to do with it once you have it? But then we found out, by talking to one of Balliol College's finest ancient philosophers, is that Empedocles' friend Heraclitus, I believe, had a theory about the universe which was based on cheese. And his theory about how the universe worked was based on a metaphor based on grating some cheese into a sort of barley and wine mixture and stirring it. And pointing out that when it's stirring it's one thing and when it stops you can sort of get the constituent parts out of it different. It's a philosophical concept about cheese. About cheese. So it's not actually Empedocles, but it is one of his friends.
So he was just holding it on.
Exactly. He was a vegetarian though, so that's nice.
Oh,
Empedocles was a vegetarian. So hence the goat's cheese, but I don't think you want to eat it.
No,
yeah,
not
especially
now.
if it's been in its
In that
loincloth.
loincloth.
Yeah.
Not pretty.
Nice and warm.
Yeah, and yes, so I'm melted. Good. Okay,
cool.
Wonderful.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone for watching so much.
thank you so much.
We've had fun doing this. So
Cool.
Wonderful. See you for the sequel.